Ahoy there, epic gamers. I'm sure you will have a lot of questions about where I've been all these years. I can assure you, this video will answer exactly 0 questions you may have. Maybe I'll leave explanations in the description if I get around to it. I'd like to start this video off with a few disclaimers, first and foremost that I might just be wasting a bunch of your time. If you already know what Q9 Rats is, then after this slide you can safely skip to the timestamp editor me will have on screen now. Say hi, editor me. I'd also like to shout out Doggin Days for this wonderful video format I will be stealing without any remorse. Our Slugger will also get a shout out for keeping my existing subscribers engaged even when they realize this video has nothing to do with Bionicle. But this video's thumbnail is not clickbait. I did in fact get a gang of 12 fish guys, an insect queen and her 5 groupies, and a baby kraken, and used them to trap Slugger in the mine prison, forever wiping out all terrestrial gastropods from this earth. It's also true that this video took a bit longer than I would have liked to make, so I may have gotten some details wrong, whoopsie doopsie. So if you've stuck around to this slide, it means you're a super cool person who might be interested in how heavily I foreshadowed this video's release. My username's kinda weird, right? What does the HS stand for? Well, it stands for Heroscape, a game I've been obsessed with ever since the 3rd grade. And that hex grid in my profile picture. It's also a Heroscape nod, and you'll see how very soon. In fact, as much as I like Bionicle, I think Heroscape's been an even bigger fixture of my life. Which is something I actually don't know, since I discovered Bionicle a year before my time with Heroscape, and I've had attention lapses with both products over the years. But I'm like 70% sure I've lapsed with Bionicle longer than I ever have with Heroscape, so now I get to ramble about it in a TTS YouTube video. But anyway, here's a quick primer on Heroscape, since you're an ignorant fool who hasn't yet learned to fear Q9 Rats. Heroscape is a highly accessible hybrid of a board game and a tactical wargame. Its presentation is very wargame-like, with players moving a team of miniatures around a map generally beating the tar out of each other. Also you get to build a 3D game board, which activates the Lego neurons in my brain. But a lot of the heavy stuff that comes with wargames is simply absent here, no tape measures, no consulting of massive faction-specific rulebooks, and the hobby side of assembling and painting your models is entirely optional. Much of the game's tactical depth comes from the units you bring to the table. You can keep the game simple and casual by bringing units with more emergent complexity, or build an army with a bit more meat on its bones and leave more room for mastery over time. This will also make the upcoming battle reports much easier to explain, since all the relevant rules are literally printed on each unit's associated card. I often introduce Heroscape to people with a quick, "Hey, remember Skyrim?" Since the core rules are very simple, it makes it incredibly easy to make high-quality, balanced, and tactically interesting custom units. If a model exists for it, there's good odds it's been made playable in Heroscape at some point. And that's not to mention all the different ways you can play. There's literally official rules for Dungeons and Dragons-styled cooperative dungeon crawls, if standard kill-em-all PvP isn't your thing. And hey, remember when Bionicle died in 2010? And a bunch of people tried making fan continuations of the story, but none of them actually got the support needed to legitimize themselves. Modern Heroscape is what happens when those plans actually work perfectly. Heroscape has essentially been a fan-operated game for over a decade, and several of those fans were hired to design a ton of units for the game's relaunch. We've been getting so much new content for this game as of late that it's genuinely a point of controversy, but I digress. Here's an example of a Heroscape card. You guys like big robots, right? Reading the card is pretty simple, and you can probably intuit most of it if you've ever played a wargame before. When moving with a figure, let me introduce you to HellCon 2025, a place with many wonderful things for me to ignore. Because it's also the host for a Valkyrie Trials tournament, which genuinely might be the closest thing Canada has to a national Heroscape championship right now. It's very small fry stuff compared to what exists in the United States, but the Southlands are a nightmare right now, so this is about as good as it gets for me. This event is a bigger version of the previous store championships, which were more like small tournaments for local game stores to host. The Valkyrie Trials first place prizing includes a golden ticket into Day 2 of the world's biggest annual Heroscape tournament at Gen Con, which is located in America. I will not be using that ticket. But the other first place prize is a special gold-based figure, and I absolutely need to have it immediately. I got first place in the previous store championship, and won the gold-based figure there, so a victory at Helcon would let me continue a very exclusive collection. With my eyes set on the golden prize, I have some prep work ahead of me. The store championship I won was several months back, and though the layout of the meta has shifted a bit, it's not so much that previous math doesn't work. The Valkyrie Trials, like the store championship, is a quote-unquote contemporary format event, so you can't use anything released before the revival. Both events are also run with a 500-point limit, so all the units in your army must have a combined point total of 500 at most. In that format, the highest tier army to beat was something I like to call bugbears. In that army, you use Frostclaw Paladins with Knight Primus Adelburn, and pair that with Queen Maladrix and her Festering Honor Guard. The two halves of the army lack any real synergy, but they're both extremely efficient bricks of stats that hit hard and take a long time to kill. It's less good in an all-time format where everything is legal, since that meta tends to be a bit too swarmy for them. Anyway, the contemporary meta has gotten a bit more swarmy. Common squads have been released, and they work a bit differently than the robot hero I showed you a couple slides back. This event also had another difference from typical contemporary format shenanigans. You'll start the game with a piece of equipment on a unique hero, a Gull Oxwing Render, which lets that hero reroll one attack die when attacking normally in melee. Adelburn can make use of this, but Maladrix can use it twice. Which is a bit of an issue in my opinion, since not only is Maladrix already super strong, and not only does her half of the Bugbear pod have a favorable matchup into the bears, but she's also the best figure by a country mile for exploiting a buff like this. I'm expecting to fight her a lot in the coming event, so no matter what I build, it needs to be ready to deal with that. So it's time to start doing science then, maybe. Well, not quite, because there's also one variable I still need to keep track of. Myself. You see, I have a bit of a problem. Heroscape has been a huge part of my life, and I do have experience taking wargames seriously, but it's actually very rare that these two things overlap. I'm very familiar with Heroscape, but the overwhelming majority of my time playing has been very casual, using suboptimal armies for the fun of it. I also play a lot of XCOM and Mechabellum, neither of which are tabletop wargames, but do promote similar kinds of thinking. In short, while I do have solid principles for good gameplay and army building, I have blind spots, and need a lot more practice than I currently have. This'll mainly come up when I break down my post-game thoughts and try to improve for the next game, but it's also a factor for preparation as well. So, what's good here? What armies do I expect to see? Well, bugbears are still going to be infesting the place, common squads be damned. As dire as it looks for any army aside from them, it does make my prep easier. When one army is clearly ahead of the rest, you can safely split all armies in the format into one of three camps. You've got armies using the S+ tier super threats, armies built as a silver bullet to those S+ tier builds, and armies getting dumpstered by the super threat. Last time around, in the store championship, I won by slightly altering the bugbear build to function a bit more like a silver bullet. Adelburn is generically very good, especially in an all-time format, but contemporary isn't all-time. So I swapped Adelburn for a weaker bear hero that was built with an anti-tank option, hoping to fight a lot of tanks like Adelburn. I also used the points I saved to run a second, different bug squad as filler, giving me something to use in the endgame that wasn't just a bloodied hero. It was a metacall that worked well. But with the introduction of common squads into the format, Adelburn's favorite snacks just got a lot more common. Your girl Irene might not be ideal if I need to clear swarms, so my old trick is probably a bad idea. And Maladrix just got a lot stronger, thanks to the wing render. Now, running the super threat does have an inherent downside, in that actually putting it on the table just feels kinda stinky. I won't begrudge those who do it though. Like I said, I ran an altered version of it myself to win the store championship. I'm willing to run bugbears again if need be, but only if I evaluate all other options and none look promising. So, what are those options? First and foremost is an army I was really excited to play before it released. Pirates. It's a more complicated, skill-testing army that seems like a ton of fun to practice with, but until now they lacked one of their most important pieces, the dreadnoughts of Caraway Cavern. Their mortal blow power can stack wounds on top of wounds, making them a perfect and surprisingly cheap counter to big heavy units like Maladrix and Frostclaws. There's also Eisnecks, who can make use of the Iron Lich's powers to threaten a big wallop whenever and wherever they need it. They just got Scavo Rith, a machine gun-wielding cyber centipede who hits harder than anything they've had before. And finally, there's a total newcomer in the Great Bow Archer Common Squad, who are pretty heavy-duty and lack the volume of fire that normally makes common squads so good, but when they hit very, very hard. And looking over all those silver bullet options, one thing stands out to me: besides the Hellforge and Eisnecks, nothing there really wants to fight anything too swarming. So, what if I brought one? It is now time for science. While I wish I could have done more prep than this, my options for competitive experience are limited, but not zero. I was able to get several hours of games in, trying out a few different builds against bugbears to see how they performed. But I did have to admit a twinge of defeat fairly early on. Maladrix is already insane, is slightly favored when fighting bears, and the format's addition of the wing render just makes her even stronger. So I just accepted that I'll be a little bit stinky and use her in the tournament. But since Heroscape has no faction lock, I can pair her with whatever I please. And to that end, Fish actually looked quite promising. Let me introduce the Valkyrie Vanguard, the swarmiest of swarmy little guys currently available in the contemporary format. The entire school of them pushes forward every round, and they twist everyone's natural instinct to gain height advantage right on its head. It's actually better to fight them from low or even ground, but if you take low ground against them, they can climb to height themselves and pour in damage. Plus, they have synergy with the Krakenling. It's a common hero so it can't use the wing render, but it hits hard, and hits up to 3 times, making it good at killing bears and Maladrix, while being immune to the Hive Queen's chest-bursting nonsense. And it just so happened that the cost of 3 squads of Valkyrie, plus 1 Krakenling, fits my remaining point total perfectly. With that said, I did test out some other options too. When pairing Maladrix with the standard anti-bugbear options, none seemed very good. The Dreads in particular, I had a lot of hope for, as they indeed were very good at making big bugs go splat. But their base attack of 3 isn't great, so they really want to be paired with the Crimson Widow. But if I use both Widow and Dreads with Maladrix, a whole 50 points are left on the table. A gap that big would let me run that second bug squad again as endgame janitors, but since Widow doesn't actually want to fight until all things that could receive her global buff have died, it meant I'd have 2 janitors, which is usually inefficient. I may have run this if I had more chances to prep and practice, but time was limited and instinctually, investing so many points into endgame cleanup seemed terrible. So I ditched the idea. As for Eisnecks and archers, I don't actually own them, lol. I did try other figures like the Dryans and Tanukis, but of the 3 army types I illustrated previously, those guys seemed firmly rooted in the realm of the dumpster. So I left them home. As I narrowed my studies towards ichthyology, I found several discoveries. The fish themselves were kinda scared of both halves of the bugbear build. Maladrix's Honor Guard, normally just used as cannon fodder, actually sting a bit if their piddly 2 attack swings into an equally terrible 2 defense. The bears were also a threat. Adelburn does Adelburn things, and the ever-durable Frostclaws had a pretty easy time shrugging off attacks from Valkyrie. I found it best to just create a stalemate with the bear on high ground and the fish on low ground, but that just meant both sides would struggle to hurt each other. I wouldn't actually make forward progress. It's also true that Valkyrie really want to swarm up with way more than just my 3 squads. The more fish you have, the more value you get out of title advance. I could drop the Krakenling and fit a 4th fish force, but man, the squid was positively murderous. Great at ambushes, and could pose a serious threat to every piece of the bugbear army. but the fish did much better against everything that wasn't bugbears. Most other armies in the format really struggled to put out the volume of fire needed to kill all the fish. When paired with Maledrix, it meant that no matter what army I faced, I had at least one good matchup. Things that kill Maledrix hate fighting fish, and things that love killing fish hate fighting Maledrix. I couldn't tell whether it was the new strongest army in the format with the limited testing I did, but it was a principled army with a diverse force. Silver bullets simply won't work on me, and when I'm fighting multiple opponents over the course of a tournament, it really does help to have 0 terrible matchups. Plus, I get to be the silver bullet into armies trying to silver bullet their way through bugbears. I guess that makes me a bronze bullet. I'd prefer gold bullets, but we'll see. And with that, I finish testing with an army I'm reasonably confident in, and best of all, it's technically not bugbears. The fight to kill bugbears will be uphill, but you know, every other build has that same problem. I plan to fight my opponents where they're weakest, selectively choosing to open with fish or bugs based on whatever my opponent hates the most. And if they hate it enough, if I can create a big enough early game lead, the other half of my army can push through a weakened force that may have otherwise countered them. Plus, I have extremely strong board control no matter who I lead with. One order marker on Maledrix moves 6 of my figures, letting me fight over glyphs and push offensively at the same time. But Valkyrie take that to a whole other level. They can get 4 move with tidal advance, plus 5 spaces of movement normally, and that's usually enough to grab whatever glyph I want. Perhaps even all of them at once. And all on round 1, order marker 1, even if my opponent goes first. Plus, Valkyrie are really good at confusing people unfamiliar with them, as everyone always wants to take high ground, which is bad against fish. I might as well take advantage of this while the fish are still new. Eventually, game day arrives, and I hurry past several awesome cosplays to reach the biggest Heroscape tournament I've ever entered. A whole 14 players. Wowie. A lot of American Heroscape players probably scoffed at that, but like I said before, Heroscape still has room to grow in Canada. Attendance for tournaments like Gen Con are so much higher than this, but that'll be out of my reach for a while. For now, this is my big league. Wowie. I got there a bit early, and was actually able to get a quick casual game in with our Slugger, who promptly trembled before the might of my Space Rabbit aggro, and don't let him tell you otherwise. As the full suite of players trickled in and the tournament organizer got things finalized, I didn't actually notice many other players running Maledrix. At first I thought I was just missing things, but no, here's the actual stat breakdown of every army brought that day. Out of the entire tournament, only 4 players had a Maledrix at all, myself included. And only 2 of them were running bugbears. Wowie zowie. Here's a quick rundown on what those army lists actually looked like. I've already talked about bugbears, Eisnecks, and great bow archers, plus you've seen Q11's card earlier on. Bear Force 1 was the main loner army any con-goers could pick up, since it's easy to use and actually quite strong. It basically just jams all the power armor bears together into a big tanky pile. Then there's the pirate hybrids. Crimson Widow doesn't just buff pirates, she also turns things into pirates. Seems like the most popular target for that is the Frost Claws, because they're already really strong even without the +1 attack buff she offers. After that is a pure pirate build. One that unfortunately lacked the dreadnoughts from what I saw, and just used the pirates from the starter boxes. Shoutouts to that guy for using the coolest little guys. I wish I could be you, but the queen said no and cracked my skull open with an axe. And then there was a Vorid player, who was presumably following a similar philosophy. I personally like pirates more, but I can totally see the appeal of Steampunk Redwall. But overall, I quite like my odds, only seeing 2 bugbear players. Hopefully I can get good matchups in pairings and dodge the bugbear game for as long as I can. Anyway, my very first game is against bugbears. And as if that's not scary enough, both glyphs on the board are ones that benefit my opponent more than me. Hawkland is a temporary glyph that, when stepped on, heals stuff in your army and goes away forever. And Ula Neva offers a +1 attack boost to every single unique figure in your army, as long as one of your figures is standing on it. Fish can't use Ula Neva, and will never need healing since they only have 2 states, full health, and a fine paste on the ground. The picture you see is from before we remembered to flip them face up. We'll fix that shortly. They're the red hexes on the map, with Hawkland on the left and Ula Neva on the right. My opening play here pretty much had to be Gulri. As bad as the matchup was between Gulri and either half of the Bugbear army, those glyphs could prove extremely troublesome if my opponent ever got a firm grasp on one. I'd also need to make sure I'm spacing my fish appropriately. Maladrix attacks twice, but if she kills something with her first attack, she simply doesn't get to use her second one if there's nothing in range. And though this was a bit of an inverse of my game plan, I did kinda like saving my Maladrix for the endgame here. She's strong enough to take down either half of the Bugbear army, and adding a severely beaten other half onto her plate seemed like a meal she could eat. My glyph control in the early game goes extremely well. I burn Hawkland for 0 value. Better that, than risk my opponent healing their Maladrix with it. The enemy bugs put a ton of pressure into Ula Neva trying to claim it for themselves, but whenever they get a kill, another fish immediately takes its place. Tidal Advance offered insane value here, since I had a ton of fish in position to contest that glyph before anyone even took a turn. The issue is that with every play I made, I was always sending at least one fish to an extremely predictable demise. The map did work a bit in my favor, though. The path to each glyph was a low-ground trench, and fish love that sort of thing. Because of this, my opponent's Festering Honor Guard weren't nearly as deadly as they were in testing, as I had a much easier time maintaining my low-ground advantage. Fish had put some damage in, but at the rate they were dying, I'd run out of them before dealing enough damage to the enemy Maladrix. So I hatched a devious little scheme. After another tidal advance push that brought my leftmost fish into the Midlands and tucked my Krakenling against that wall, I made a play intentionally designed to look like a blunder. 3 fish altogether, ripe for Maladrix to kill. But to climb into range for that, she'd need to make herself vulnerable to this high ground perch. A well-timed Krakenling could teleport onto that spot and put serious damage in. I just needed my opponent to take the bait. All goes according to Keikaku. With the lives of 2 fish sacrificed for the greater good, the Krakenling warps in and puts 3 attacks of 5 directly into Maladrix. We roll the dice, and, well, she still lives. I think my epic trap only dealt like 2 damage. Maladrix attacked back, and my Krakenling got 1 more round of damage in before eventually falling. The bait wasn't as good as I'd hoped, to be honest, but it did enough. The enemy Maladrix is in a critical position now, and easy prey for my Maladrix to defeat. In the aftermath of that fight, I finally run out of fish to contest Ula Neva with, so my opponent grabs it. But I also get a quick bit of tidal advance movement to put my enemy's Maladrix in a precarious spot. I then take a turn with Maladrix and her Honor Guard and just make things so much worse for her. The enemy Maladrix is at 1 life left. And in order to move or rotate at all, she'd need to risk a leaving engagement attack. Even one of those, dealing 1 damage, could kill her outright. I use my other Honor Guards to make my opponent's options even worse, but I do make a slight blunder here. The enemy Maladrix can still hit mine, and potentially infest her with a chest burster, but she'd have to dodge 3 leaving engagement attacks to do it. Very unlikely, but not impossible. I could have made it actually impossible with any one of 2 minor tweaks to this position, but my opponent opted not to risk it anyway, so I went unpunished. After that, it's time to confirm the kill, which I actually managed to land with a pesky Honor Guard. She drops her wing render on the ground, and my Maladrix picks it up for the dual wield, because that's how equipment works in this game. After all that, I've still only killed half of my opponent's army. Bears still lurk, and are still a threat, but at least I'm now better equipped to deal with them. I also kill the opponent's Honor Guard on Ula Neva, but can't reclaim it myself. Overall, I quite like my position, but I know not to underestimate bears. A quirk of the game does still work in my opponent's favor here. If you go last in initiative order for 1 round, then go first in the next one by winning the initiative roll, you essentially get 2 turns in a row. And I went first in the current round, That's how I was able to pin the evil Maladrix so thoroughly. If my opponent gets the double turn here, I could still be in trouble. And unfortunately, that might be what I got. At least, I think so. Like I said, it's been a while. But I'm pretty sure that's how it happened, and shut up, I'm telling the story, not you. Bears rush in and hit about as hard as you'd expect a bear in power armor to do, splattering my honor guard, claiming Ula Neva, and menacing Maladrix pretty hard. I move Maladrix hoping to get an early infestation into a full life Adelburn, but I think in the moment I simply forgot to roll for it. You can tell this was a pretty tense moment, since I forgot to take any more pictures of the game beyond this point. I think I also got baited here. I should have moved Maladrix down to contest Ula Neva, but my opponent had offered up Adelburn here to pull me to the wrong end of the map. Fair play, honestly. I bait my opponent once, they bait me in return. Unfortunately, not only did I have the poo-poo baby brain and just forgot the one thing I went to Adelburn to do, my mistake was more costly than my opponent's, since I rely on my Maladrix's survival more than they relied on theirs. Still, Maladrix is pretty good at killing bears, and that's before she dual wields axes. But my opponent hits harder too. With Ula Neva secured, the bears were able to get 2 attacks of 4, and 2 of 5, on every single order marker. Much better than my 2 attacks of 4 with 2 rerolls each. I put in serious damage, but a loss is a loss no matter how little life my opponent has in the end. GG, well played. So, I start off the tournament with a loss. One I probably deserved, but a loss in round 1 never feels good. There is a silver lining though. Despite my misplay in the endgame, and despite the glyphs giving my opponent an advantage from the start, I still had a reasonably close game with the strongest army in the room. If I end up fighting this army again, I know for a fact I can win. As for assessing the game itself, man, bears just hit so damn hard with a +1 attack boost. In future games, I need to divide and conquer. Maladrix can punch through their armor, and while her own defense of 5 is good against smaller attacks of 3, attacks of 4 can put in real damage. I also need to not be stupid, that would help I think. I should be taking more time to analyze where the real value is on the map before just entering big punchy guerrilla mode. Fun as it is. With all that said, it's about time to enter game 2. This time around, we're fighting Eisnecks. But because you can't actually fit all the Eisneck units into a 500-point army, my opponent has decided to forego the Hellforge and fill in the remaining space with Acolytes and Kita. Acolytes are interesting, because like any good supervillain, the player using them wants to kill their own underlings in the opening scene. Acolytes automatically revive one of their number at the start of each round. They revive next to any of your Revenant heroes, of which the Eisneck have many, and let you re-roll dice when attacking and defending. A bit niche, but they have delightful flavor. Kita is just Kita. As for the normal Eisnecks, they can put a ton of damage into Maladrix very quickly. But when punching a fish, 7 attack is about as valuable as 20. Overkilling a 1-life fish is very funny, but not super strong. So I'll be opening with fish here, and thanks to Tidal Advance, they'll put a wall in front of Maladrix and prevent Skavorith from ambushing her. I'm also glad my opponent didn't bring the Hellforge, because that thing would roast my fish without mercy. Though Skavorith is typically regarded as the stronger general-purpose unit, so it's not surprising my opponent made the choice they did, because the Lich and the Wraith Riders aren't really cuttable. For the ball boys, this picture shows why. Remember when I gushed about how strong the fish are at taking glyphs? Balls are just way too damn fast, and grabbed the glyphs immediately. One of those glyphs was Feleron, which is a one-use glyph that removes another glyph. Since this map only had 2 glyphs, my opponent turned this game into a no items, no side nonsense, perfectly ethical deathmatch. Which I was fine with. My army's main game plan is to send in the half with an ideal matchup first, then dismantle my opponent's ability to appropriately defeat the half they'd otherwise beat. In this army, the target of my unfathomable rage will be Skavorith without a doubt, and the balls as a secondary target. How will I do that? Well, the plan is surprisingly simple. The Iron Lich can get free turns with whatever Eisneck unit they please, so they'll want to pick the one that offers the best value in the moment. Starting off, that'll be the Wraith Riders, since they can put out a collective 4 attacks per order marker. And against a swarm like mine, they'll absolutely need good volume of fire. But once I kill just 2 of the 3 ball boys, Skavo-Rith becomes the better target, since he can attack twice, and 3 total attacks is better than just 2. Fish will have a hard time killing Skavo-Rith, but he's also much squishier than Maladrix was, so a potential Krakenling ambush can be even more devastating here. I've put my Krakenling in the midboard to best enable this. Until then, it's all aggression, all the time. I need ball boys dead, and while that effort does take a while, no machine can withstand the tide forever. Behold, mere mortals, the fruits of my labor. The Krakenling has gamed once again, and even though Skavo-Rith had rerolls from the Acolyte behind him, a Krakenling teleporting onto high ground just does so much damn damage. Much better than last time. Skav had like 1 life left by the time it finally shot my precious baby in the mouth. Maladrix watches, salivating. You can also see that my remaining fish aren't anywhere near the low ground map edges. They were here to bust balls, and high ground is much better for that. The one thing they just couldn't seem to do, though, is injure the Iron Lich, despite my best efforts. But no matter. The Lich is good, but needs synergy to actually be worth anything. And he's about to have none of that. I move up Maladrix somewhat cautiously, since just about anything with a vial injection can put serious damage on her. It's not something I can completely avoid thanks to the movement boost it grants, but I can limit how strong it is. I'm probably gonna have to tank 1 Skavo-Rith attack no matter what, but if he's coming in for a punch anyway, I might as well set myself up for a good counterpunch. There was definitely a risk taken here. Maladrix has been killed from almost full health by an injected Wraith Rider before. That actually happened to me in the final game of the previous store championship, but I got better. And luckily, I didn't see a repeat occurrence. Skav made a desperation play to put as much damage into Maladrix as possible, but barely scratched her, and immediately died in response, dropping his wing render on the ground. After that, there's very little my opponent can do to really hurt Maladrix. The Lich kills what he can, though, which are the remains of my Gull-Re forces. He's quite good at this, since as a ranged unit, he can easily find safe, even ground to shoot fish from. But I think I'm content to let him shoot fish in a barrel all day long. My queen has a job to do. Since he had a gun and I didn't, the Iron Lich got to dictate where the main final battle happened. He found a high ground perch Maladrix was too fat to join in on, but even with high ground, his gun struggled to break Maladrix's armor. My opponent opted not to kill any of my honor guard and tried to focus down Maladrix anyway, which is definitely the correct play, since Acolytes can at least maybe kill my tiny bugs. It also denied me the ability to respawn them via chest bursting, but I don't recall even considering that as an option at the time, so I probably would have forgotten it again regardless. Predictably, the Lich gets yanked off his perch, ripped to shreds by Maladrix's overtuned stats. But like last time, one of the honor guards somehow managed to kill Steel. Again. Now, I have Maladrix and all her honor guard, against the Acolytes and a tiny baby fox thing. This is, not a good situation for my opponent. Kita did survive an entire barrage of attacks from the Queen without so much as a scratch, though. But with 2 attack on everything my opponent had left alive, the odds of them winning were basically 0. Eventually, Maladrix stopped cooing at the adorable little fox it was supposed to be murdering and pummeled it into the ground. The Acolytes didn't fare much better. GG, that's our first win of the day. Really proud of the outcome here. This was an absolutely textbook victory for this army. It performed exactly as it was meant to. In fairness, this victory was like 80% prep and 20% actual in-game performance. My opponent's army was not built to handle this many fish, and we clogged the gears. This would have been a very different game at a different army size. Eisnecks are a great and flexible toolbox army, but at 500 points they just can't fit all the tools they'd want into that box. Normally, they'd still have the option of killing Maladrix before she got a chance to activate, but with Tidal Advance, Gull-Re forced the Eisnecks to chew on nothing but fish until the Krakenling decided otherwise. All that said, though, I think I may have been a touch too aggressive with Valkyrie in this game anyway. I think committing some to high ground for boosted attacks into balls was the correct move, but I could have been more selective with it. By the end of things, I don't think any fish were left on the lowest ground in the map. If they were, then the Lich wouldn't have been nearly as good at picking them off in the endgame, and that'd give me an insurance policy in case the Skavorith attack into Maladrix had been more devastating. Ah well, live and learn. My next game is up against Vorids. It's a fun army with a lot of cool tech pieces, but for the moment it's missing a main synergy piece to tie everything together. What you see there isn't my opponent's whole army though. Tuck Harrigan and the Glide Strikers wait in the skies to drop in whenever an opportunity strikes. Again, a really cool and interesting power. Overall, I still think I like my odds here. Vorids have tricks, and many of them, but those tricks lack a punchline. Because they don't punch very hard. You get it? I'm very funny. I'm pretty confident I can win this, but there's just one problem. One critical flaw. One that has me genuinely terrified, and may have been the reason I kept forgetting my bug has bug powers. I'm hungry. I haven't had enough brain fuel, and as my stomach starts growling, I start making misplays that are just downright embarrassing. For example, after moving all my fish with tidal advance and beginning my turn formally, I just start moving all of my fish again. All of them. Not the legally mandated 4. I catch myself and rewind the play, but being that stupid has put the fear of God into me. If I can autopilot myself into thinking Valkyrie aren't a 4-man squad, what other mistakes can I make? I still need to win, obviously, but that's not going to be good enough here. I need to win this game as fast as humanly possible, and start scarfing down as many snacks as I can. I intend to win this match ASAP, and luckily, the glyphs on the map worked in my favor. Felaran is on the right side, but Valda is on the left. And as long as I have a figure on Valda, my entire army adds 2 to their movement stat. I grab it on my first order marker and throw as many fish into the fray as I can, claiming the hill near my opponent's start zone. I'm trying not to complicate things too much for myself here. I need to take height, and drown the Vorids in my sheer weight of numbers. And those numbers do me well. With height advantage, fish put in some serious damage onto my opponent's high-value heroes, and they struggle to get damage back in since their entire army caps out at base 3 attack, with only 2 attacks per order marker at most. That is, assuming the Glide Strikers can't build a strong enough presence on the board, but thanks to tidal advance, there's no real safe drop zones for them to take. Still, there's absolutely no shortage of misplays from me. There is no reason at all why my Krakenling should be in that water pit there, as its 4-space teleport doesn't really threaten anything. Especially not with the front line pushed so far ahead of it. But high ground is high ground, and it's doing well for me so far. After Zed Nesbit falls, Imperator Kane comes in to take his place as my opponent's main fish killer. With higher defense and that stomp power, he's actually doing pretty well at clearing me off the hill. But there's plenty of fish in the sea, and Valkyrie can work through his armor eventually. My opponent is also taking time to set up with Tuck and the Glide Strikers. Glide Strikers can only drop 1 at a time, and luckily, I have fish everywhere, so there's very few spots on the map where a striker can glide in safely. They're effectively suppressed. With 3 fish working through Kane and 1 dedicated to striker hunting on each of my order markers, my opponent is quickly running out of options. In the end, there's just too many fish for the Vorids to deal with. Fun fact, Frostclaws actually used to be able to chain free turns with these Vorid heroes too, not just Jandar champions. The bears got nerfed before release, and since they're still an S-tier super threat, I'm glad they're not even stronger than they already are. But since that choice was made, it left all the Vorid heroes in my opponent's army in a bit of a weird limbo state. If my opponent was able to get 4 more attacks with every single order marker, this would have been a very different game. But alas, that doesn't exist. At least, not until the next wave of releases, but those aren't here yet. For the time being, Vorids just completely lack the volume of fire needed to properly deal with fish. Here's another fun fact: if you control no figures on the board, you lose the game on the spot, even if your army isn't fully destroyed yet. This is what happened here. Fish were so aggressive that they got a victory before my opponent had even deployed their last 2 glide strikers. GG. We're now sitting with a 2-1 record, which feels pretty good. I definitely got lucky here, but hey, welcome to Heroscape. My post-game thoughts primarily consisted of the word eat, spammed a million times, which I promptly do, since I was at least smart enough to pack an emergency snack bag through the convention. With the immediate problem out of the way, I start thinking more about my opponent's army. Kane is pretty cool. When those chain gruts come out, I bet he'll see strong play at top tables. But as for the present day, I'll need to keep track of my mental fatigue. Low food is one thing, but that combined with big brain setups can exhaust my mental resources even further. I suspect that the biggest mental drain, aside from the food, was the constant need to pre-measure and maintain adequate spacing between all of my fish and Maladrix's threat range in that first game. Armies with more decision points tend to be more of a mental drain over the course of many consecutive games, which genuinely can put you at a disadvantage against simpler armies in a competitive setting. Just something to note for next time I'm doing tournament prep. Anyway, on to Game 4. If you want to see this game from my opponent's point of view, go check out Slugger's video. It's got much higher production quality than mine, but it also lacks funny quips delivered in a bone-dry TTS voice, so it's worse. Anyway, Slugger's army is pretty interesting. Terrifying, but also very predictable. Bears with +1 attack are scary, and the Crimson Widow's mere existence guarantees that buff no matter what. But it also very clearly telegraphs a bear opening, so I know to use my counterpick here. Also, this is the first map with a major terrain rule. All those red hexes are lava field tiles. Anything standing on them at the end of a round has a 50-50 chance of taking a wound. So we gotta play around that. Unfortunately for me, my opponent's opening is pretty terrifying. Not only did I lose initiative, but the glyph of Quivalin is on the map. Once a figure steps on it, the glyph is removed and the player can move any 3 of their figures 5 spaces each. So if the first Frostclaw Slugger moves steps on that glyph, the other 3 can move 5 spaces, and then start moving normally. So basically, I've got hyperspeed bears with +1 attack staring me down, and nowhere on the map is truly safe. Slugger will get to pick whatever type of engagement best suits him, and there's nothing I can do about it. At least, that's what you'd think. Because you see, I am firmly rooted in my comfort zone, and there's nothing Slugger can do about it. I move my Maladrix off to the side of the map, and make a wall of honor guard to functionally guarantee she can't be hurt on my opponent's next turn. I'm gonna start rambling about wargame theory now, so while we go on this ride, see if you can figure out what Slugger's best play is after my move. Slugger made an interesting remark in his commentary of this match. The opening move he made is one he practiced a lot, right down to the exact position of Adelburn and each individual Frostclaw. It was like a chess opening, quote unquote. This is interesting because this trick I pulled, this lateral waiting move, well, it's not a trick I picked up from the chess world, but it's most popular there. Have you ever heard of anti-computer chess? It's a tactic designed to beat a chess computer that's way better than you are. Essentially, you create a stalemate with basically 0 obvious good moves. Force the AI to make smaller, waiting moves for as long as you can. Computers hate doing this. They're programmed to find good plays, and do them. But if there are no good plays, if every possible play is roughly the same level of mediocre, they'll struggle to find the best one. They may even make a mid one. Or a bad one. Your job, then, is to spot that mistake when it happens, apply sudden pressure, and carry that momentum to a victory. Do you see where I'm going with this? Based on my experience at the table, Slugger is a very strong player. And while the best players will always make the best possible move, strong players will always make a move that's within a certain margin of quality of their best possible play. The tighter the margin, the better the player. So, what happens when every possible play someone could do, even plays that are basically self-sabotage, are reasonably close in quality to their best possible play? What if they're simply overloaded with underwhelming options, but all those options are within their usual margin of plays they'd make? Well, they might just pick an underwhelming one. Or even a bad one. After some thought, Slugger chose to mirror my defensive play, staging the bears on lava field and delaying the attack until his third-order marker. In theory, this still offers the bears time to leave the hot rocks before the end of round lava damage rolls start getting made. In practice, I saw a slight misstep, and I put pressure on it, sending honor guards to their almost certain demise to try and pin the bears in place for a turn. The very same turn that would burn the bears with lava. I feel pretty secure with Maladrix on height, but for my opponent, the screws are tightening. Slugger still has plays at this point, but instead of them all feeling mediocre, they all just feel bad. Bears could pivot around the bugs to leave lava without risking any leaving engagement attacks, but doing so put them in low ground, in front of Queen Maladrix. They could also just take the leaving engagement attacks or stay put and do nothing, but they risk taking damage in either case. Risks like those are often worth it for some potential upside, but there really isn't much upside available here at all. My little bugs are basically doomed, but that's less than 30 points of material sacrifice to put Slugger in a serious bind. Also, shoutouts to that rightmost bug for actually wounding the Frost Claw on height. The idea with that play was to bait the bear's rotation onto Wannock, a glyph that forces its controller's opponent to wound one of their own figures at the end of a round. Since I'm last in initiative order, I don't actually care if the bear controls Wannock, since I can just kill it with Maladrix before the round ends. And that would net me 2 wounds of bear killing value. Or at least it would have, if my bug hadn't foiled my plans by actually succeeding in its attack. Very impressive, and still better value, but also it ruined my scheme, so I hate it and hope it dies. Anyway, basically all of Slugger's moves here feel like bad ones. So what kind of play do you think he'll make? The wounded bear on lava stayed on lava, and a healthier bear was sent to hold Wannock instead. Another bear got aggressive and started punching my honor guard reserves, while the last one goes to eat some fish. This picture is from after my reply, where I sent in Maladrix to feast on Frostclaws. Turns out, she was a hungry girl. But before we even get into that carnage, I did something really annoying. See this honor guard wandering away from the action? It's actually hiding its true power level, even from me. You see, my opponent never actually used the Quivalent glyph. So now, I can threaten it. If anything tries to stop my bug, that figure is going to be wildly out of position and become combat ineffective for a turn or two. Which is often just as good as outright killing it. This is a tactic I picked up from playing Warhammer 40k. And while I'm tempted to give this one as much analysis as I did my opening defensive play, I'm just going to say, I own 14 crisis suits, with 4 commanders, and those in the know will nod their head. What I didn't realize at the time was that this one bug was also putting in double duty, threatening the exiles of the Sundered Sea as well. Which is much more valuable. Normally I'd say that I 100% definitely intended that play from the start, but I think the idea of a festering honor guard being smarter than me is funny, so it's canon now. Back to Maladrix. This play was a touch risky. If I didn't drop those 2 bears, I've provided 2 easy height perches for Maladrix to get killed by. But I felt that risk was worth it. I'm eligible for an initiative switch here, and the potential upside of murdering a bear pair is still pretty good. I feel like I ended up luckier than I should have been here, killing a bear and wounding another, with the bear that stayed on lava dying to it. But hey, even if things were more statistical, say, needing both attacks to kill the bear on Wannock, Maladrix still has good odds against 1.5 bears and 8'll burn. Speaking of, my next play after this picture was to disengage from the wounded bear, taking damage in the process, to get even ground attacks into Adelburn and try to infest him. Not necessarily because Maladrix wants him dead, but because my fish absolutely do not want to fight that guy. Even if Adelburn lives and immediately grabs high ground again, and even if he kills Maladrix, my fish need him weak if they intend on avoiding getting mulched. And opinions are pretty unanimous on that. You heard it here first, Queen Maladrix believes in democracy. I'm also happy to report that I actually remembered Maladrix as a bug this time, and rolled for infestation, getting it. Too bad it didn't really matter. Maladrix was hurt bad after this fight, and after killing the last bear, lava damage burned the queen and her baby shortly after, ending the insectoid reign of terror. The fish just loved this. Gulri rush up the board in a new round, activating the still unused glyph of Quivalent to just fly across the map. One Frostclaw still lives, but against sheer numbers it won't last long. Gulri have exiles to kill, and common squads tend to beat unique ones. A lost exile is gone forever, but I get 4 fish activations no matter what. It's not long before the tide reaches my opponent's start zone. And yeah, this one's pretty predictable. GG. We've officially made it 3-1 in the tournament, making me eligible for top cut and a chance at the golden prize, but I'm not out of the woods yet. Not everyone who went 3-1 will make it to top cut. I need the opponents I've beaten to have strong win rates as well, as that's the tiebreaker that'll let me through. It's also noteworthy that anti-AI tactics work well on Slugger, a revelation that definitely doesn't mean anything. As proud as I am of the strategic plays I made in this game, I'm still only 60% confident that I engaged Maladrix at the right time. After all, in Game 1 we saw what happens to Maladrix when she gets surrounded by boosted bears. If my attacks had done no damage at all, I didn't really have a backup plan. But she was my punish for the Wannock bait play, so I'd already committed to it long before she actually had to move. The Exiles of the Sundered Sea didn't have a great showing this game, but they are a solidly strong unit in their own right. Check out Slugger's other games for easy proof there. Anyway, after the round ended, scores are tallied and it's time for top cut. I cross my fingers hoping I made it in, and it turns out I did. Yippee. Only one problem though, my win rate tiebreakers were good enough to let me in, but only just barely, making me the 4th place seed, and therefore, I'd be placed against the 1st place seed in the first round of top cut. And that is someone, the only one, to have gone completely undefeated all day. I can still win, but it's gonna be a bumpy ride. Game 5 starts, and there's 2 immediate huge issues. First of all, the opponent's army. It's bears buffed by Crimson Widow again, but the Dreads are here too, another huge threat to Maladrix. Second of all, remember the Ula Neva glyph from Game 1? It's back again. These bears can go up to 5 attack, and so can the Dreads. That offers a frankly ridiculous amount of damage, so Maladrix isn't looking great here no matter what my opponent leads with. And Gulri are only going to be strong into the Dreads. The other glyph in play is Loden, which offers +1 on all 20-sided die rolls. Which Maladrix does with her infestation, but I typically don't regard a buff like that to be worth it, unless your army is heavily reliant on d20 rolls going well. It's only a 5% consistency buff. Anyway, these multiple consecutive jump scares cause me to open the game with a misplay. I start out with my fish, not my bugs. The idea was to use Gulri glyph control and make sure Ulaniva couldn't be a problem, but aside from the baby kraken they wouldn't really have a great way of killing bears. And they'd have to deal with Adelburn, which in the last game, was a situation I was willing to risk a leaving engagement attack to avoid. The kraken here has a good wall to teleport through and can threaten high ground with said teleport, but this map is pretty wide. If the fight happens along a flank, which it will, since that's where Ulaniva is, my Krakenling perch doesn't offer much value here. A Maladrix opening would have been much better, especially since my opponent's opening move was to split his bears up across the map rather than cluster them into a Death Star that would nuke Maledrix on sight. +2 attack bears are insane, but dead things don't hurt me, and at least Maledrix can make things die. Especially isolated ones. Either way though, this game was gonna be rough, and I just made things worse for myself. I get exactly what a goal reopening does into bears: rush up, take glyphs, and punch fists into cold steel. Even when denying a +1 attack boost, these bears swing with 4 attack anyway, and prove extremely capable at killing my fish. And that's before Adelburn joins in, able to stomp out multiple fish with every activation. But as if things weren't bad enough, this map is pretty flat. My ability to sit in low ground holes is hard to come by, which means fairly often, the enemy bears are swinging from even ground into me. For attack into 2 defense is very, very rough. At least the Krakenling is good at bear murder, and is able to put in work. I just wish I'd deployed it on the left flank rather than the midboard, since then I could have at least put damage into the bears contesting Ulaniva. Once all is said and done, the fish half of my army is combat ineffective, the Krakenlings at 1 life, but all the bears are dead. I walked away with some value, but nothing worth the material I'd spent to achieve it. Over 300 points of my army, either sacrificed or functionally sacrificed, to eliminate just 120 points of bears. Not good. But if I'm doing copium math, the enemy Adelburn is combat ineffective too, since order markers dedicated to his card are just way less efficient than Dreadnought activations. This is technically 150 points of value for me, if you're insane. Which I have to be if I'm going to win this game. As for those Dreadnoughts, the only upside here is that they're each easier to kill than Frostclaws, and there's fewer of them. But they hit so much harder. And once my opponent dedicates a turn to sliding their full life Adelburn onto Ulaniva, I seriously doubt I'll be able to shift him off of it. Maledrix can win this, but it's going to be tough. Here, the tension is high. No more pictures after this one, I was too focused on the game and forgot to take any. But I'll walk you through what happened. I stage Maledrix up the midboard, threatening Adelburn from high ground if I need it. My opponent stages the Dreadnoughts really well, using Midnight Raid to rush 1 here on the right flank, 1 behind the wall on the left, and only 1 inside Maledrix's threat range in the midboard. With this movement, they slaughter my little bugs, further reducing my options. I could choose to engage the guy in the middle, and almost certainly kill it with a high ground advantage, but doing that would place me within the threat range of the other 2 dreads, who would both converge at the same time for very high damage. But I had another option. I could dedicate bugs to tie up the dreads, and swing 2 attacks into Adelburn, potentially even infesting him for a possible insta-kill at the end of the round, which would also secure Ulaniva for myself if that happened. For those more experienced with the game, I'm curious what you would have picked, because I'm pretty sure I ended up making the wrong one. I took the safe route, but the attacks went poorly and I forgot about epic bug powers again. At least Maledrix is safe for a turn, and the dreads use it to clean up the remaining bugs. Staring down the barrel of a height attack from a double-boosted Dreadnought, I risk the leaving engagement attack from Adelburn to attack it instead. Which drops it, but put Maledrix in the threat range of a second dread. She gets hit, and takes heavy damage. And by the time that dread falls, the third one is in position to finish her off. That third dread had also taken the time to kill the Krakenling before arriving, so that left me with 2 Gulri to finish off the dread, the Crimson Widow, and a 7-life Adelburn. Given that Adelburn alone has an insta-kill move for the fish and beats their threat range, I conceded the game to my opponent. GG, well played. With a 3-2 record, the best I can place now is 3rd. Which is still very good, and I'm guaranteed to get the silver-based figure, but the gold one is out of my reach. No bad rolls to blame here. I made several misplays against a player on a perfect winning streak. I can't be doing that in the top tables. Even beyond the poor choice of opening, poor Krakenling positioning, and lack of anti-dreadnought aggression from Maladrix, I was also inexperienced against armies that actually want to take turns with Crimson Widow. I failed to factor in Midnight Raid's threat range when staging my bugs after bear death. This cost me the ability to converge my pawns on specific dreads, which would have prevented their ability to converge on the queen. I simply made far too many mistakes in this game to expect a win. I can blame mental exhaustion, but my opponent was dealing with that too. You may have noticed that both the Frostclaws and the Dreadnoughts had split up to better contest all the glyphs, including Loden, which my army didn't really care about. We were on equal footing, and my opponent simply played better than I did. A well-deserved win on their end. My only real solace was that, even if I had started off right with a Maladrix opener, I still could very easily have lost this game. I lost initiative, which meant the Frostclaws had dibs on Ula Neva. Maladrix would be facing attacks of 5 and 6 from Adelburn. It's a hard game, but I can't let it get me down too badly. I still have one more round to win. My last game of the tournament is up against Bear Force 1. All bears, all the time. Which means they all share the same weaknesses. As for the glyphs, the +2 move from Valda is there on the left side. The right side glyph is Feleron, I think, but it escapes my memory. Either way, since I won the initiative roll here, I'd be nabbing Valda before my opponent could. And Maladrix, my army's main tank breaker, sees a whole lot of tanks that need breaking. No time to wallow in defeat. The queen is mad, and it's time for a redemption arc. I'm quick with the aggression here, using Valda's bonus to pin the bears in their own start zone. Even the bears that are free to advance, really don't want to. This map has a big slope right in the middle, and engaging Maladrix from low ground is never a great option. The bears take the time to crush the bugs pinning them in place, but Maladrix needs at least one of those bugs to die so that she can respawn them with infestation. She stands atop the hill, watching the carnage, waiting for a moment to strike. The plan here is to infest one of the 2 bear heroes early in the game, and then focus down the squads. With time, the chest bursters in the bear heroes will pop, and at this stage I have plenty of that. As scary as the bear heroes can be, it's more efficient to leave them alive for the potential insta-kill later down the line. Right now, I need Frostclaws dead. When Maladrix finally rolls in, it's a bloodbath. She risks some leaving engagement attacks for her trouble, but we're here for the carnage. Adelburn stands aside as he's more of a squad killer than a hero killer, letting the good knight Irene take on the queen. For her trouble, the bear knight gets infested with a chest burster. Maladrix slaughters as many of the smaller bears as she can, and does a solid job of it. But since she's fully engaged, she can't step back to infest Adelburn as well. I'm locked in with them, but they're locked in with me too. Engaging a lot of bears at once is dangerous, but these bears are only swinging for 3 attack, not the 4 of the bears from round 1. The remaining bears close in, and their power fists meet a blender of hardened chitin. In the aftermath of it all, Irene goes down, alongside all the Frostclaws. However, once the queen fell, things hit a moment of tension. Enough to make me stop taking pictures at a regular basis again. Oopsie. Here's basically how it went down. The Ordo Borealis stood in the back line, and Adelburn joined them to pick up Maladrix's dropped Gull Oxwing render. They bears want to move up, but there's a problem. The trees are making fish noises. Across the whole map, my Gullry have set up defensive positions among the bushes and in the swamp water. They want to rush in too, but don't want to fight Adelburn just yet. I've staged them such that an order marker on Adelburn can only kill 1 fish at most, but if he runs in to do that, he'll be immediately converged upon by 4 other fish at once. That's hard to justify with an order marker, so my opponent puts theirs on the Ordo Borealis instead. Their heavy weapons can shoot far enough to hit my fish, but they're shooting into highly boosted defenses, be it from height, water bonuses that Gullry get, or the special jungle defense bonus, which is a terrain rule offered by the foliage on this map. It gives +1 defense against ranged attacks for any non-huge figure standing next to them. Neither of us are in a position to commit fully to an attack, so the game is tense for a while. I send in fish, but only one at a time, to throw chip damage into the Ordo Borealis in a way that Adelburn can't multi-kill his way through. My endless string of single combat is enough to strike down one of the Ordo, but it also buys time for something very special. Thanks to Tidal Advance, each round that passed also offered a chance for the Krakenling to move up. And when Adelburn finally saw an opening to strike, the Krakenling pounced. 3 attacks of 5 swung into a defense of 3. Even with Adelburn's 8 life, the Krakenling can rip straight through all that medium defense meet. And it does. Adelburn drops dead. The remaining Ordo fire back at the Kraken's ambush, but with high ground, the Kraken's shell wards off their 2 attacks of 3. Maladrix's Bearborn Bloodbath gets a sequel, and the Krakenling wraps up the game. I went 4-2 at Halcon's Valkyrie trial, taking home a 3rd place finish. All things considered, I'm pretty happy about that. Not that this TTS voice is capable of sounding enthusiastic about anything, but still. Woo. Yeah. Oh yeah. Anyway, as for this game, a lot of it felt fairly textbook. Bears died to things good at killing bears, and things bad at killing bears mainly just distracted them. It's possible I went a bit too aggro with Maladrix. There was one point where a Frostclaw could have gotten a height attack against Maladrix, but my opponent missed it too, and I fixed it on a later turn. I also got lucky with the Krakenling's total murder of Adelburn, but even if it was just severe damage rather than a kill, Gulri can clean that up. In general, man, the Krakenling is just wonderful and I love him. He's my special baby boy now. I did also play another casual game after this, though. And this one was against the player that ended up in 1st place. I wanted to run a game where my Golden Iwashia faced off against the evil gold-based Loviatak, and I'm so happy I got it. Many thanks to the champ for putting up with me here. This game was great dumb stupid fun, and instead of walking you through it, I'm just gonna mash my way through this part of the slideshow. Many parts of this game need context to understand, and I think it's way funnier if they don't have it. Plus, this video has taken way too long to make, so now you have to deal with my nonsense. But overall, that's my run through of the most entertaining part of Halcon 2025, objectively speaking. And I'd love to play in more tournaments like it. But before I can, I need to do a post-mortem, where I learned such valuable lessons as, eat more, moron. Heroscape may be a fairly casual friendly game, but even then, a multi-hour event needs a full stomach. I'm very glad I brought snacks. Other than that, I feel like my general inexperience really showed here. Gulri were almost as new to me as they were to the other competitors, and there's some real depth to how you play them and their height disadvantage shenanigans. Crimson Widow was another big one, not just in Midnight Raid, but in how much value she brings with her global +1 attack buff. I wonder how she would have fared if I took her in Dreads with Maladrix despite my instincts saying otherwise. Giving +1 attack to the 5-man Honored Guard squad seems like great fun. And if I'm ever looking to do Krakenling stuff again, if I'm in a format that doesn't favor Maladrix so much, I'd want to bring at least 2 of the funny squids. Converging multiple squids on a single target seems like a great solution to a subpar ambush. But speaking of Maladrix, wow, she really is just an insane unit. Fantastic stats, chains extra turns with a 5-man squad, and has a super swingy insta-kill power to boot. Most figures can only do one thing like that. Some of the best ones only do 2. Maladrix is just a complete package, and she plus the Honored Guard costs less than Frostclaws plus either of their bear champions. She's going to be a super threat for a long while to come. As for my 3rd place finish, I feel pretty happy with it. I didn't end up with my all-gold champion collection, but let's be real here, that was never going to last through every tournament I'd need to attend to keep things up to date. And I'd love to keep going to events like this. Time will tell where or when those events might be, but if I see a chance for more Heroscape, rarely will I not take it. That's it. That's the video. Goodbye.